the way I memorize the midpoint formula is you're going to have 2 points given, and it's just the average of the x values, comma, the average of the y values. Now I want to point out something here that I find is a common error, and it sincerely drives me crazy, and that is, you see this word midpoint. Your answer when you are trying to calculate the midpoint is a point. Like, it's actually an ordered pair, and I say this sincerely because I know this mistake is going to happen. You guys are going to be asked to find the midpoint, and there are a handful of people that are going to use the distance formula to find the midpoint. But you don't need the distance formula to find the midpoint, because all we're doing is looking for a point for an ordered pair, so you need to use the midpoint formula. Average of the x's, average of the y's, it's an ordered pair. Likewise, some people, when they are being asked to find and use the distance formula, they'll be asked to find the distance of AB, and they will use the midpoint formula instead to find the distance, but that doesn't make sense, because the distance is how far apart it is between 2 points, so it doesn't make sense to put an ordered pair for your answer if it's asking for a distance. So do think about what the question is asking, and if the format your final answer is in makes sense, because like I said, it happens every year. It's quite frustrating, makes me cry a little bit, you know. All right, so we have this line segment with the endpoints 2, 3, and -3, -5. So this is A, B, and we're going to go ahead and draw that line segment. Okay. And we're going to find the coordinates of the midpoint, and then we're going to plot it. So the midpoint, again, it's just the average of the x's. So that's going to be 2 plus -3 over 2, comma, the average of the y's. So that's going to be 3 plus -5 over 2. So the midpoint is -1/2, comma, and then -2 over 2 is going to be -1. Okay? So average of the x's, comma, average of the y's, it's an ordered pair. So let's take a look over here. If we go -1/2 and down 1, here's our midpoint. We'll label that guy M. All right, so there's our midpoint M. Okay? So in the distance formula, we are finding the difference between the x's. So what happens sometimes is some people aren't thinking like, oh, average of the x's, I know to add them and divide by 2. They're thinking like, ooh, like, do I add the x's here or do I subtract them? Because I know in one formula I add, and I know in the other formula I subtract, and I can't remember which one's which. So a common error, some people will try to subtract these guys, right? And if that happened, you would get 2.54 for your midpoint. So let's go ahead and plot that guy. So 2.5 and then up 4. Okay, this is our common error. Okay, there's our common error point right here. So common error midpoint. Can anybody tell me, if you were to get that answer, can anybody tell me why that just doesn't make sense? It's not even on the line, right? So the error is not even on the line segment and not approximately close to where the midpoint would be. Okay, if you draw a quick sketch, you can kind of have a feel for where the midpoint is supposed to even be. So if you even drew a sketch of this and you got this for your answer, you would know right away, like, oops, like I guess I'm supposed to add there, not subtract. So if you are finding that you forget, go ahead and draw a sketch. It makes it so much easier. The other thing too is you guys have your ACT program, right? So it actually gives you the formulas in there. And again, if you have it and you want to use it as a reference, right, you're more than welcome to do that, as long as as it's on the calculator section, you know, that's fine. I would say for the most part, you guys should probably get in the habit of not using your calculator, but do use it to check, especially for homework and stuff like that. All right, so last example for the day, we're going to be using translations. So a translation is just when you're moving a point, a segment, you can move a whole graph, right? You're moving it left, right, up, and down. That's a translation. So if we have this point A and we shift it 2 units left, what is changing, X or Y? All right, if you're going left, that's changing your X, right? And then how is it changing X? What are you doing to X? You're subtracting 2, perfect. And then if you're moving 5 units up, what's changing, X or Y? And what are you doing to Y? You were adding 5. So what they want you to do is we have this point A, and we're going to find new coordinates. We're going to call this A prime. All right, so this is my translated A, okay? And we want to find that. So what you're going to do is from A to A prime, you are going to take -3 minus 2. That's going to shift that guy left. And you are going to take 8 up 5. And so A prime is -5, 13. All right, now if you guys are expected to translate, just so you know, I'm okay with you jumping right to the answer. All right, you don't need to write all this stuff out and show all the work. All right, this is simple addition of integers. Like, I feel very confident you guys could do this in your head just fine. Okay, so if you have this point and this is the shift, feel free to jump right to the answer. Okay, so here is where this translation applies. Sometimes instead of asking for the midpoint, it's going to ask you for the other endpoint. All right, so what's happening here is they are giving you the midpoint from A to B. So they are giving you here, this is M. Okay, and then they're saying, all right, well this here is A, and we're trying to figure out what B is. All right, so just to draw a little sketch for a visual aid here, we have -4, 1. This is A, and the midpoint is 2, -3. This is the midpoint, okay? Which means if I connect these here, right, this means that B has to be somewhere out here. Make sense? Everyone okay with that? All right, so we're trying to figure out B. Now, you can set up algebraically all this stuff, but this is a great application of transformations because the reality is, if this is the midpoint, the translation from A to M is going to be the same translation from M to B. It's kind of like slope, right? Like rise over run. Whatever you're moving to the right and down, you have to move the same direction to the right and down in order for this to actually be the midpoint. All right, it's got to be the same distance away, so the translation away is going to be exactly the same. So the question is, well, how far am I moving right and how far am I moving down? So that's what we're looking at. All right, so to get from A to M, all right, so from A to M, what are we doing to the X value? So -4 to 2 is going to be X what? X plus 6. So we're moving right 6. Everybody okay with that? And then for Y, what are we doing? So A to M, it's 1 to -3. What are we doing? We're minus. We're going down 4. Good? So now we're going to actually go from M to B. Okay, so now we have M to B. We have to do this translation. Well, we know what M is. M is 2, -3. So we have then 2 plus 6. So I'm going to go right 6. And for my Y, I'm at -3. So I went right 6. And now I need to go down 4. Therefore, what is b? 8, negative 7. Okay, so translations are a great way to find that missing endpoint. All right, any questions? Yeah.
If you just set up the equation, like the midpoint equation, but put it as like -4 plus x over 2.
Yes, so that would be the alternative. So what you can do is we know that the midpoint is the average of the x's and the average of the y. So that means that 2, right, has to be the average of these two x values. So -4 plus x over 2. And then we have -3 has to be the average of the two y values here. So that's going to be 1 plus y over 2. You can also algebraically solve. So you would get 4 equals -4 plus x, add 4, so x equals 8. And then here, 2 times -3 is -6 equals 1 plus y, so subtract, y is -7, and then you also have your ordered pair that way. So there are two ways to do it. So this is using the midpoint formula, algebraically setting it up, solving for the x and y, and this is using translations. It is perfectly acceptable to do both methods, all right? I have no preference. All right, everybody good? Any other questions? That's a great one. Any other ones? Yeah.